There we go. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Down the Ballot, where we can talk about politics, history, uh, social issues, life. You get a ballot in the election day, and we sometimes forget that life, all those decisions we make, impact us throughout the rest of the year, not just on election day. So that's sort of the idea behind Down the Ballot is that we explore issues that impact us beyond the election sometimes. So my two guests here are Ken Hawkins and Jim Hier, and we're going to be talking about, because this month has been a big month for talking about the legacy of President Jimmy Carter, who passed away at the age of 100 in December. And we have two folks who have been affiliated with the Carter world in different perspectives for many years, and we're going to hear from them about their recollections of spending time with the Carters and their work in Carter world. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here.
Our pleasure.
Who would like to start off and introduce themselves?
My name's Jim Hier. I've been involved in, I guess, political interests for most of my life. I was a history major in college, and I just, when I was a teenager, just got the bug and became very interested in all things presidential. And that's what eventually led to a nearly 30-year friendship with President Carter, and all sorts of people affiliated with his administration and his post-election or post-presidential life. Pretty good for a kid from the San Fernando Valley who grew up as a lifelong Republican. So, but my republicanism is more in the terms of a George Bush, or I used to say Romney Republican, but no one understood what that meant. So.
And I'm Ken Hawkins. I'm a photojournalist. I have been for all my life, all my adult life. And I first knew the Carters in 1970 when then former state senator Carter was running for governor. And so it's been well over 50 years, and it's been an interesting ride.
Yeah, that, as I said at the beginning of our talk here, before we started rolling the camera, I think, Carly, you've got a good perspective here with Ken having really been there from the get-go when it comes to Jimmy Carter as president. And I can kind of backfill with stuff that's been going on with the work of the Carter Center and things like that.
So let's start with Ken then. So Ken, what's your first recollection from me? Like, do you remember the first time you met Jimmy Carter?
Carl, I can tell you exactly the time. I can't remember the date, but I can remember exactly when I met Jimmy Carter. I was a young newspaper photographer at a small daily outside of Atlanta. And one of my first assignments, as a matter of fact, was to photograph a gubernatorial debate between Hal Suit, who was a wealthy, well-heeled Republican who appeared on television several times a week doing commentary on one of the major TV stations in Atlanta, usually political commentary, and Mr. Suit was very involved in Republican politics. He had a big following, and he was to debate a red dirt farmer from Plains, Georgia. And so when I got the little assignment sheet and headed to the debate, I looked at that and I just kind of smiled, thinking, well, obviously the Republican is a shoo-in. And then I listened to a few minutes of the debate while I was photographing, and time after time, that red dirt peanut farmer was cutting the wealthy Republican off at the knees with his answers. And so that's exactly when I met Jimmy Carter for the first time.
So Jim, so we'll go to you now. When was the first time you met Jimmy Carter?
Well, that's a good story. It actually, I'll tell the story in a second, but it is the first time I met him, and it relates to my later involvement. But I was in college. I was interning in Washington D.C. in the fall of '77, and Carter had just been elected, and I was with we were doing all sorts of like consumer stuff and what have you. But the company got assigned to do the PR support for the passage of the Panama Canals, the grassroots effort here in the States. And so that was pretty exciting. And we had a big meeting. This was November, like I said, '77. We had a big meeting from around the country, all the delegates from for the passage of the canal treaties. And we had all sorts of speakers and what have you. And one of our main speakers that day was Henry Kissinger. And so in the world outside of Washington, Anwar Sadat had just made his overture to go to Israel and meet with Menachem Begin. And big deal. And so after Kissinger talked to us about canal treaties, the press was all gathered outside, wanting to talk to Kissinger about the Sadat overture. And my boss wrangled me. He said, "Okay, Jim, follow Kissinger out. There's a bunch of press, and they want to talk to him about Sadat. And you got to make sure that the door that's going to be behind you doesn't open up during the press's interview with Kissinger." Dutifully, I said, "Fine, I'll do that." So we go out, and there's Kissinger. He was being accompanied by Pamela Harriman and me, and I just like threw my body up against the door just to make sure no one would open the door. Kissinger gave his interview, and everything was going fine. And come to find out later that night on TV, it was the reporter interviewing Kissinger, and me. And all I was the doorstop. But after that, we had a reception at the White House. So you can imagine my excitement. This is my first time. Excuse me, I got an alarm going off. My first time ever going to see a president in the White House, and we get into the East Room, and it's me and about 900 people just crowded into the East Room, and we were going to hear from the president. Well, at the appointed time, crowd starts to murmur, and all of a sudden, I find myself in the middle of the East Room, smack dab. And if you're familiar with the layout, it has essentially three main doors to go into the East Room. And I was in kind of the middle of that room. And so the hubbub starts. People are going, "Oh, the president's coming, president." And I'm trying to get a glimpse of this guy who was not very tall, but 5'8", 5'9", something like that. And I look to my left, all of a sudden I see this familiar head popping up and down. And here's Carter shaking hands and coming into the room, going up to the front. And he goes up to the lectern and he talks to us for about, 5-10 minutes about the work we're doing to support the canal treaties. And then he goes to exit. And I'm thinking to myself, I blew it. I should have been on that side of the room because Carter seemed to be exiting the same way he came in. So I'm standing there watching, and then all of a sudden I realize, oh, wait, there's action happening in front of me. What's going on? Carter had turned, and I'll be darned if he's not making a beeline straight for where I'm standing. And so now all I can focus on is my right hand. I want to try to shake hands with the president. And he's coming down, he's grabbing hands, what have you. He's right in front of me. He grabs my right hand. My left arm is just flailing out here. I don't know what it's doing. As he grabs my hand, someone behind me takes and shoves my left arm, and it ends up going around his shoulders, and I kind of have him in a headlock. And I'm like, Mr. President. Well, that lasted all of like a second before the Secret Service, busted us up. But that was the first time I met, quote, met the president.
Up close and personal.
I got a lot of mileage out of that story for years. And so speed ahead a few years. In 1998, a friend of mine got me involved in a fundraiser for the Carter Center. And it was a dedicated weekend, a long weekend of skiing and what have you, with the Carters, members of the Carter Center, and supporters. And so I thought, well, this would be fun to go, and he was insisting it was a great event, great access, and that sort of thing. I wasn't that big a fan of Jimmy Carter at the time. I had, quote, met him at a book signing a couple of years earlier. And, but I figured, okay, we'll see what this is all about. So I go to the weekend. And it happens to be the weekend that the whole Monica Lewinsky scandal broke open. And so my friend is, we're at within the group gathering, we're having a cocktail party one night. My friend is there, and he brings me over to introduce me to President Carter. And sure enough, as advertised, great access, very unpretentious. And so he introduces me to the president, and we're standing there and just kind of chit-chatting. And I tell the president, I said, well, you have no reason to remember this. And we've actually met before. I told him the story of how I hugged him in the White House when I was an intern. And that's how I framed it with him. I said, but I'll have you know, and he looked kind of alarmed when I said an intern hugging the president. And I said, but I'll have you know, I haven't told that story in a long time. And with current events being what they are, I'm not gonna start it. So that was really the start of our relationship, if you will, was the work with the Carter Center and fundraising for about the next 25, 30 years.
Jim, I actually remember that event in the East Room, and I may have your picture in the crowd.
Oh, that would be hilarious. Yeah, that was it was COAC, the Committee for the Advancement of the Canal Treaties.
And the canal's very seems to be very timely these days.
Carl, as an aside, since Jim brought it up, I will add one thing, and that is that I was also at the White House the day that Omar Torrijos came in to sign the Panama Canal treaty with Carter. And after the ceremony, let's see, I think he went to the Oval Office first, and then they went to maybe the Pan American Union building to sign it. Anyway, I went to one of the protest demonstrations outside the White House, and the majority of the protesters were American Nazis wearing the brown shirts, the helmet with the swastikas, and very fired up. They were all a bunch of pudgy white guys,
Hmm.
and it was a shameful demonstration.
Oh, that's terrible.
So Ken, so you were you were in the White House as a photographer. What was your when you get assigned to the White House? Like, what is your typical day like there? Like as a photographer photographing the president?
Well, I was shooting for Time magazine at the time,
Mm.
and so there was a rotation of photographers that would go to the White House. I was also doing other things. I was doing some conflict work out of the country down in Central America, so I wasn't there a whole lot during the presidency. But the time that I was there was rather memorable. And so if you were there on the day that there was an international trip that was supposed to start or scheduled to be there, you would go on the international trip. Otherwise, if you were just at the White House, it was it was pretty much drudgery.
Hmm.
It was like being an animal in the zoo and looking out through the bars. You know, it's one of those things where you would get the call. You would be in the White House press room, get the call, line up by the door. You go up several levels through security, and finally you're whisked into the Oval Office. There is what they now call a spray, which is basically it's just a lot of photographers and sometimes some film, now video people,
Yeah.
going in to do a shot for maybe 3 minutes, and then the staff yelling at you to get out. But it was not usually a very interesting job once you were in the White House proper.
Was there so I mean, you're on you part of it is, the campaign trail before Carter becomes president. Then when Carter's president, you're covering him a little bit. What was there a for you, was there a more enjoyable part of covering Carter? Like,
Oh gosh, the campaign trail was fabulous. I mean, it was just you know, I look back at it now and I see that in my lifetime it's probably the last grassroots political campaign.
mhm,
Yeah, I think that's
Everything else has been, in my opinion, way overfunded and over lobbied. This was grassroots. Carter had the what they termed the Peanut Brigade, which were a bunch of local people from Sumter County and surrounds from Georgia that would go out on their own dime and canvass ahead of then Governor Carter coming into a state or into a city. And like I say, it was grassroots, and it was for me being a young photojournalist, it was just a great American moment to memorialize.
I mean, the idea of, Carter campaigning, I've done, research about Carter's campaigns here in Oregon. I think one of his first trips was here in 1974, 1975. And like even back then, like the campaigns, the way they operate, there's a little bit of pettiness to campaigns. And when you have that many people that were in the field that they had in 75 and 76, like, apparently someone complained because most of campaign violations, they're complaint driven. And so I guess somebody complained to the Oregon Secretary of State about about Jimmy Carter giving out peanuts on the campaign trail. And it was an item of peanuts were considered an item of value, and you couldn't just give them away because it might have been constituted a bribe to a voter. And so the Secretary of State ruled that the Carter campaign could not give out peanuts to Oregonians, but they could give out buttons and stickers and any other normal type of campaign paraphernalia, which is like I don't know if somebody today, tried to give me peanuts versus a button, like, and asked me, well, which one here has more value? I was like, well, of course the button's going to have more value as a button collector. It's going to have more value in 20 years. Somebody tried to give me a 20-year-old little baggie of peanuts and be like, no, that's quite all right. That's no value to me. So it just seems fascinating that the campaigns, in some ways they're very different, but in some ways they haven't changed too much.
That's a remarkable story. I hadn't heard that. And the bags of peanuts that were given out on the campaign, of course, did have the Carter logo on it. So I could see where that would be a campaign item.
Well, they were very inventive, I thought, when it came to campaign paraphernalia and stuff. Right down to the colors they used to promote the candidate. Everyone was used to red, white, and blue or versions thereof, but to come out with this green and white, it was fresh, it was new, and they were not above trying out stuff if they thought they could make it work.
Well, Jerry Rafshoon was a master at the image, and he was the media guru for Carter, and they were very. The TV commercials that they filmed were very low tech, very down homey. They showed Carter out I think they showed him in a cornfield at times.
Yeah.
I don't think he raised much corn in Plains, but
Right.
they also showed him in the peanut field. And they were black and white. They were just, like I said, very low tech. And I think that had an appeal. And Jim, to the color schemes. Ford was using red, white, and blue.
Right.
And Ford was campaigning with all the trappings of the presidency, hoping that would help him to be pushed over the top. Well, one of the things that they did is they showed Air Force One going by maybe Yosemite or Mount McKinley, whatever. But it was pretty grand, and it was pretty stately. But Carter was shown shoveling peanuts at his warehouse,
Right.
and it was a real labor intensive farm kind of an attitude. It was grassroots America, and with Ford, with the stigma from Watergate, I think that people really turned against that, and I think that Rafshoon and Jody Powell, his press secretary, turned against that and saw a real opportunity to present the what might have been a downside, that is being a farmer from South Georgia, to creating quite a media stir as an upside.
I remember hearing Jody Powell tell a story about they were early days of campaigning. They were somewhere, probably Iowa, and Carter said he was very dutiful. If Jody said do this, he'd do it. Well, one day Jody says, "Well, I got you on TV," and Carter goes, "Oh, great! What is it?" It was a cooking show.
From the state fair, I believe.
Yeah, and so Carter just was like, "You got to be kidding me!" But he went ahead and did it.
Hey, press is press.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
So Ken, are there we're gonna lean here a little bit for campaign memories. Are there any particular campaign memories that you were present for that stick out to you?
There were a lot.
If you had to pick like
You're
one
the
or
man
two
in the
favorites,
room.
what do you think they would be?
We flew on Peanut One later in the campaign, which was a United Airlines plane, and I think that there was, well, I don't know this for certain. I think that there was a big hubbub with the fine folks with Delta Airlines, Delta being a Georgia hometown airline, and I think there was a huge problem once Carter gained national media attention and flying on that United plane. I think there was a real issue there.
Well, and he remained loyal to Delta for the rest of his life.
Oh, he sure did. He sure did. And Delta to him and the Carter Center.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Much to their credit. Yeah, they've been big supporters of the Carter Center. But Yeah, well, one thing during the campaign, I was awakened. We stayed at a hotel in Americus. A hotel is using the word loosely. It was the Best Western Inn in Americus, which was about what, Jim, about 9 miles from Plains.
Yeah, yeah, 9, 10 miles.
Yeah. But there was no place to stay
Right.
in Plains. So we stayed in Americus. And one morning on the campaign, we were back home in Plains, and I got a call about, I don't know, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and it was Jody. And I was a little bit groggy, and so Jody gets on the horn and says, "Ken, can you help me out this morning?" I, and I kind of through the haze, I said, "Sure, Jody, what do you need?" And I was on Time Magazine's dime, so he asked if I could do a freelance job. And I said, "Well, I have no idea. I'm, under contract to Time." And he said, if you can see your way clear, I'd really appreciate it. And when the press secretary who controls your access says, "I'd really appreciate it," you try to do what you what you can to help him. So anyway, I called my editor, woke him up in New York, and got special dispensation to take the morning off to help Jody. Well, I still didn't know what it was. So I was told to go to Carter's residence, 1 Woodland Drive in Plains, Georgia. Pull up to the gate. There's a state trooper there. And fortunately, I knew the trooper, and he knew that I was coming. So he lets me through, and I park in front of Carter's residence and walk up to the door. There's another trooper up there. Might have been Secret Service at that time. And Jody meets me. And it turns out that Playboy magazine had been doing a long-term interview project with Carter for the front of the magazine Playboy interview. This was going to be the wrap-up. This was going to be the last interview. And I forget the fellow's name. It'll come to me. But Barry Golson, the managing editor of Playboy, had come in for the last part of the interview. The only problem is they forgot to hire a photographer for it. So it turned out that I was going to be the photographer on the Playboy interview. And okay, well, it's pretty simple, just a series of vertical tight headshots, and you're out the door. Well, we go in, and then Governor Carter welcomes us. Rosalind welcomes us, all with a cup of coffee. And then we sit down, and the interview starts. Well, I keep making photographs, and it's interesting. So I really didn't want to get up and leave. So I finally did get up, and Rosalind had invited me out to the kitchen. I don't know if it was for coffee or breakfast or whatever, but we knew each other. And so when the interview was over out in front, I walked out in advance of the two reporters that were there, and they were still chatting with then Governor Carter at the doorway. Well, I heard the "lust in my heart" comment, and that presented a bit of a conundrum, because I heard something that could be considered rather earth-shaking for a fellow campaigning for the president. Now, admitting to having lust in his heart was something back in 1976 that would set off alarm bells. And my conundrum was that I couldn't tell my quote unquote employer, Time Magazine, and I had to keep that under wraps because I was working for Playboy at the time. So that I did. And
wasn't that comment actually made technically after the interview had wrapped?
It was after the interview had wrapped, and President Carter and I had a conversation about that at the Russell Federal Building when his office was there before the Carter Center was built. And I agree with him in that the interview was off the record at that point. The Playboy folks claim that it was still on the record, and I disagree with that.
Hmm.
Seems
So
almost like it's the modern day media standard of everything's on the record. There's no off the record.
absolutely, absolutely, yeah. So I lost any respect I had for those two reporters, but it was quite a story, quite a hubbub, and I'm sure that they sold out every issue of Playboy that month.
No.
In subsequent years, Carter was, people would bring things to have Carter sign, what have you. And he was actually proud to sign that Playboy, but he'd always add, this was the best selling issue of Playboy ever.
I have one. And I think I brought you one, didn't I, Jim?
Yeah.
So, Jim, what's a particular memory of the Carters that sticks out for you that you think people should know about?
There's a couple. Well, I think first and foremost, and it reminded me just as we're talking here, when Ken was saying, well, how far is America is from Plains? I was active with the Carters for several years. But I had never been to Plains. And I talked to the president about visiting one day, and he said, well, you got to come. So anyway, I had the opportunity to do that. And I came away from that visit to Plains feeling I now understood who Jimmy Carter was. And I don't think anyone really can understand who Jimmy Carter is without understanding Plains, Georgia. The effect it had on him, and just the atmosphere that town, brings. And as we were talking earlier, unfortunately it's probably one of those things that's going to fade into the past, and in the future, people aren't going to be as aware of what it means when we talk about small town America and things like that. Plains was it, and so that's probably first and foremost as an overarching thing. The other aspect to the Carters was they were just normal people. I'd see them, disagree and complaining at each other on things. I remember, probably shouldn't tell us, but we were one weekend we were going down for breakfast, and President and I were sitting at the same table, and some young waiter came up, and he was very nervous because he was the former president. And he asked him, waiter asked Carter, "Can I get you anything?" And he says, "Yeah, I just want a plain thing of yogurt." And the guy goes, "Oh, okay." And he was gone forever. And he finally came back about 20 minutes later, and he just empty-handed. And he goes to the president and he says, "I'm sorry, I couldn't find any plain yogurt." Carter's natural instinct was, after waiting so long, was to kind of snap. And he started snapping. He said, "Well, you had some yesterday." And that put the kid back even more. And but Carter caught himself and he said, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's fine." He was just human. I mean, he would snap. The other thing I would say is his sense of humor. I don't think he got enough credit for, not that it was, he wasn't going to go on a comedy tour or anything like that, but he liked to have a good time, and you could see that twinkle in his eye when he was about to lay one on you. I remember one time he and I were talking about we were talking about planes, and he mentioned he asked if I'd had boiled peanuts. Well, I hadn't had any boiled peanuts, and he was going on and on about how wonderful they are. Oh, Jim, you gotta try some. Blah, blah. So the next time I was in Plains, I had some boiled peanuts. I thought they were miserable, and so when I saw the president, I said, "Oh, hey, I took you up on your suggestion about boiled peanuts. Oh, what'd you think?" I said, "Frankly, I didn't think they were very good." "Oh, well, they aren't for everyone." And that was it. It was just like, here I thought I had a big duty or assignment to eat boiled peanuts, and that was it. But he was, he loved to joke. He loved to kind of have fun with you. And I think that's when I knew that I was in his comfort zone, and vice versa. I remember missing a meeting, and I saw him and I apologized. "Oh, sorry, I missed the meeting." He goes, "Oh, well, you weren't there, so we just canceled it, And so he gave as good as he got.
He had a bit of a wry sense of
Yeah.
humor. So we were in Los Angeles. He was doing a ribbon cutting or groundbreaking for the Martin Luther King Mental Health Center, I believe it was. It was part of a campaign swing. And while he was up on the podium speaking, and this was in 1976, this is before he was elected, I had gone under the bleachers that were set up, and I was trying to make my way around in back of him to get another shot. And I don't have a whole lot of padding, and I came up too quick, and I caught myself on one of those metal girders underneath that hold the seats up, and blood is gushing. And there was a nurse, or doctor, nurse, whatever, that put a big bandage on my head to stop the bleeding, but I still had blood coming down the side of my face, and I'm trying to work and keep the blood out of my eye. Anyway, head wounds bleed a lot, I guess. But anyway, on the plane going back, we were in the back section. Carter and his staff were up front, and the curtains, as they used to have on the planes, parted, and here comes Carter, and he's headed right towards me, and he comes back, and he is holding something behind his back. Well, it was the yellow hard hat that they had given him for the groundbreaking, and it's got the County of Los Angeles seal on it, and what the dedication was, or groundbreaking, or whatever. And he said, "Next time you photograph me, wear this," and popped it on my head. And I said, "Mr. President, I'll only wear it if you sign it." And so he signed it, so I've got a nice memento there.
Well,
He did have a good sense of humor,
yeah. And
especially when I was in pain.
he's not really well known for that, but it was always fun to see that side of him.
Yeah. So thinking over the coverage that you've seen, and you've sort of hinted at this with his sense of humor being highlighted, are there ways that you've interacted with the President Carter or the Carters that you don't think has been talked about in the mainstream media, like things that you've seen them as normal people having a sense of humor, stuff like that? Is there any memories that point out that you go, more people should have seen it? If only we had the camera here for this. They should have seen this. This was amazing.
Let me say, from my aspect, my viewpoint, he was a normal person who did extraordinary things. Yeah. And that, to me, is it in a nutshell. I don't know how well that's been conveyed, but he was absolutely normal. He did not put on airs. Many of his friends in Plains were not of his point in society.
Mhm.
There were a lot of folks that were farmers and laborers who he talked to just like he would speak to the leader of another country, and it just a really good man.
Yeah, yeah. I echo that, and it goes along with what I said earlier about understanding Carter more when I went to Plains. The people in Plains that growing up in that community, being part of that community, really informed who he was, and that was more important than what Washington D.C. Uh, said of him in many
Mhm.
ways.
Well, before we get to our final two questions, Ken has some photos he'd like to share, and I was hoping he could share those at this time and
Sure.
talk to us about these photos.
Let's see if I can work this. Let's see. Well, did that work, Carl?
Yep, we can see them.
Well, good. I'll just briefly describe what we're seeing here and then move on. This is I spoke about this earlier. This was my first exposure to then the former state senator Jimmy Carter, and that is Hal Suit, who was the wealthy Republican on the right. And I think that State Senator Carter had just made a point, and he realized it. I don't know if you can see the expression on his face, but I think that was kind of a gotcha moment.
Yeah, that's the look he had whenever he had that.
That's it.
Yeah,
That's it, Jim. You know it well.
yeah.
This was during the January 1971 governor's election. He had just taken office, and he had or was just about to declare that there was no place for racism in Georgia anymore. He, of course, took over the governor's office from the segregationist Governor Lester Maddox. So there was quite a bridge that
And,
was.
and I mean, it just, this is always one of the things about Jimmy Carter that just sort of strikes me as, adding to that, you know, come from nowhere mentality. Anything can happen to anybody in this country. Like someone who's just you know, Georgia governors were term limited at this time to serving 1 2-year term, or was it 1 4-year term?
Um,
4 year, I think.
One 4 year, I believe.
So the fact that you can be a one-term governor, and this country, if you know get your finger on that pulse, the next stop is you're in the White House.
That's it. That's it.
Well, that was Jody's whole premise for the campaign following Watergate.
So, as governor, Carter could go home. There was no security around him, and not many people even recognized him. This was the announcement at Warm Springs, Roosevelt's little White House in Warm Springs, Georgia. This was the announcement for president. That is Chip in the light suit over to the right there. Rosalynn can barely be seen, but one kind of interesting thing here for all you political geeks, and by the state flag of Georgia there, which still had the stars and bars on it, is a Secret Service agent with his right foot up on the stage there. His name is Chuck Zaboral. And Chuck was the detail leader of the Carter campaign. And if you recall from the JFK assassination inquiry, there were two Secret Service agents, young agents, that were supposed to be on the tail of JFK's limousine that day in Dallas. Chuck was one of those.
Oh, really?
This was a street corner in New York, and Carter would have his staff, his advanced people, identify a corner where there's a lot of lunch traffic. And this was in Manhattan. This was one of the first I guess this was the first trip to New York City. And what they would do is they wouldn't have a permit to set up at all. They would just hop out of a van. They would put up a couple of concrete blocks that held the Jimmy Carter for President sign. And then Carter would come along about 10 minutes later and do his stump speech.
Guerrilla marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. One of the first campaign stops was in North Carolina. Carter walked up a long dirt road with me and a couple of staffers, and he did a farmer to farmer contact. And the local weekly newspaper reporter slash photographer came out to document it. We were the only press there.
Wow.
This was on the bicentennial day in Westville, Georgia, where he made a speech. And the reason I'm including this grip and grin kind of a picture is the lady with the pin curls. I just love her. He's got a 76, Spirit of 76 tie on too.
Now, there's a little bit of trivia on that photo. If you can go back, look at his wristwatch. What do you notice about that?
That is facing backwards.
Yeah, right.
Oh.
And he did that. He wore it so that the face of the watch would always be here. And that is a hangover from his submarine days. So that when he was looking at the through the periscope, he would be able to know what time it was.
Oh, neat.
Another farmer to farmer contact. I think this fellow was already in the bag for him. He had a Jimmy Carter for President bumper sticker, or else one of the staffers, while he was talking to him, slapped one on the back of his truck. The Carters were very astute campaigners. They believed in face-to-face campaigning, and I think we're landing at a little grass strip airport in Illinois, if I remember correctly. So Rosalind would take one small airplane, Jimmy would take the other, and they would split out and cover the state. And then they would usually meet back together at night and spend the night together. They didn't like to be apart.
Right.
And the airport dog, I love the airport dog out there to meet them. Not one for luggage fashion. Jimmy went, I think, to the local Belk store, which is a kind of a discount department store, and bought his suitcase that he traveled with. He also had a garment bag that Johnny Carson used to joke about him carrying his own garment bag. NASCAR events, again, very astute in politics, but I think to this day that Carter was probably the only person out of 100,000 people at that racetrack that had on a suit and tie. So Jimmy, Rosalind, and I were having an adult conversation. We were waiting on a reporter from Time, actually a bureau chief from Washington, from Time to show up for an interview, and the three of us were talking. Amy was on the floor of the Carter's sunroom in the back of the house, and Amy interrupted our conversation, and the Carters saw that as being rude. Well, Amy was immediately, well, first of all adult conversation immediately stopped. Mm-hmm. And Amy was summoned to her dad's lap, where there was kind of a come to Jesus moment. And to this day, she's never been rude to me. Charlie Daniels, the performer, was rarely seen without his hat, but he doffed Jimmy with his hat. And that is downtown Plains, Georgia, with a plane over it. The small building on the left, on the bottom corner, is the office for the Carter Warehouse, and that's where the business was conducted. The sign that you see, it says Plains, Georgia, Jimmy Carter, our next president. That is where the Carter Warehouse, the secondary office, the warehouse office was. And that's pretty much all of Plains right there.
Wow.
Yeah, the depot is just out of the photo to the lower right.
It is. This is Billy Carter on the left, Jimmy on the right, and that is Leonard Wright, who was the Carter tenant farmer who basically tended the fields when the Carters were when Jimmy definitely was out of the area. When the vice presidential candidates were interviewed before the Democratic convention, then Governor Carter would invite the candidates that he chose to come down to Plains. He didn't go to see them. They didn't meet in Washington. Here he is going through the Carter family cemetery with John Glenn. And then continuing, here's Jimmy and Amy with John Glenn and Leonard Wright, the tenant farmer, and his daughter. Jimmy put a lot of trust in his friendship with Leonard, and I think he valued his judgment. So he would run the presidential candidates through Leonard. And the young girl that you see Leonard holding is she was the first employee of the Carter Center after the Carter Center opened. Miss Hollis. In interviewing for vice president, this fellow from Minnesota came down, Fritz Mondale, and they're conducting a presidential interview while there's a Sunday church picnic. And I think this was before Hairspray. And Carter and Mondale got along famously. And I think they told quite a few jokes back and forth. This was during a meeting, a transition meeting at Miss Lillian's Pond House, which is just outside of Plains. And we would spend most of our off time in the afternoons playing softball. This was taken from a Kodachrome slide, a color slide, and that sky is as deep a blue as you'd ever want to see. Just a gorgeous sky. In the background with his glove up is CBS's Bob Schieffer. And Bob has a huge chaw of tobacco in his mouth. I sent him a tighter picture of that, and he said, "Don't ever let that get out." Carter, I think this was after the election, he was quite the athlete, and he did not like to lose at softball. That's James Wooten in the background, who was the bureau chief, senior White House reporter for the New York Times. And Carter got along great with the press, even though they wrote some stories that he didn't approve of. This is Carter, Mondale, Billy Carter, and then members of the press, part of the softball team. That's Jack Watson, who ended up chief of staff for Carter, in the middle with the sunglasses. Leonard Wright again, the tenant farmer. I titled this series Watermelon Man. We went on a walk that day, and we all had some really tasty watermelon. And again, he would carry his own garment bag. And like I said, Johnny Carson made fun of him for that. If you remember the photograph that I showed you of Governor Carter then walking and nobody paying attention to him, when he came back for the first time as president, he was mobbed. That is the depot on the left side of the frame.
Oh my gosh.
This is Uncle Alton on the left, Alton Carter, and State Senator Hugh Carter on the right, and of course the president when he came back for a visit. And there's a sign in the background there saying, anyone that wishes to contribute $1 or more to our new Baptist church in Plains, please ask for Senator Hugh Carter to make a contribution. Well, that new Baptist church ended up being Maranatha, where the Carters went after a racist incident or two at the Plains Baptist Church.
Right.
Conversely, the gentleman on the left, Alton Carter, was a worm farmer. He had a huge layout outside of Plains at his little farm, and he grew magnificent earthworms. He also bottled vegetable wine, and if you've never had tomato wine, I suggest you continue with that. It was really hard to see any visual expression of frustration that then Governor Carter had during the campaign, and this was a rare moment when the polls were against him.
So not when someone offered him boiled peanuts and tomato wine.
Correct. Ooh, now there's a combination, Carl. This was a meeting of the new cabinet at the cabinet to be at the Pond House, Miss Lillian's Pond House. And again, Carter made every one of these Ivy Leaguers come down to Plains and travel down that dusty dirt road to come and see him. He didn't go to them. During the meeting, very intense. That's Stu Eisenstadt in the trench coat in back, Jack Watson in front of him, Mike Blumenthal on the left, Charles Schultz on the right, and I think it's Keith Mason standing over him in the suit coat. This was the day that Hubert Humphrey came down to visit with President-elect Carter, and it was also revealed on that day that Hubert Humphrey had a fatal cancer. This is a group of Southern politicians here. That's Herman Talmadge, U.S. Senator Herman Talmadge on the left. Frank Moore, who was congressional liaison for Carter, of course, Carter, and then there is Senator Wright over on the right side of the frame. There's Carter with that jaw set, going into a meeting at the Smithsonian Institution, where he was set to do some sort of battle. I don't recall what it was, but his UN ambassador, Andy Young, right by his side. This is then President-elect Carter going to Washington for the inauguration, and he had to bring Amy's dollhouse. He handcrafted that dollhouse.
Wow.
They put it in a rental truck and drove it to Washington. This is the night before the swearing in. That's Zbigniew Brzezinski in the background, his national security advisor, and he is taking calls of congratulations from world leaders there. This is in the upstairs private area of the Blair House, across the street, kind of catty corner across the street from the White House, across the street from the old EOB. And Carter was really frugal. When he could travel on a smaller jet in the Air Force fleet, he would do that. And I believe this is a Jetstar that he was traveling on, but they would slap a decal on the side of the plane and it would become Air Force One. This is Rosalind as she was about to undertake her first fact-finding mission to South America. And this was a moment that I saw over and over again during the campaign and the presidency. President Carter would just nuzzle, for lack of a better word, with his wife, and I just always thought that it was a very touching moment. This is the picture of Omar Torrijos, the general, I guess he was, Omar Torrijos from Panama on the day of the Panama Canal signing. This is seeing Rosalind off on another trip. I just like the effects of the jet blast. And Carter would walk to meetings. If he had a meeting at Treasury, if he had a meeting at State, no, not at State, that was too far, Foggy Bottom. But if he would have a meeting within, say, a mile or a mile and a half of the White House, he would let his Secret Service lead know, and everybody would scramble, and he would walk to the meeting.
And aside, and again, I don't want to interrupt, but these
Yes.
are wonderful. When we would go off on our weekends and things like that, we'd be in a city or what have you. The Carters loved walking everywhere. And I'll never forget one time we were in San Diego, and they just happened to be walking in front of me. And it was Jimmy and Rosalind, a couple of their kids, and the detail. And they were just taking in the day, walking down the street in San Diego. I would hang back, and I just loved the reaction of the crowds as they would pass by, because there was no flourish, no flair. And all of a sudden, these young people were going, "Who is that? Oh, did you see that?" And they just go nuts. And it was a lot of fun. We did that one time here at Multnomah Falls. You were there for the weekend.
I was there.
Yeah. And I remember they went into the gift shop at Multnomah Falls, again, unannounced. And this crowd just gathered, and they were like, surprised that, here we are, and there's the former president. And the thing that still gets me when I think about it is when he finally said, "Okay, we're going to go," and he waved goodbye. They just erupted in spontaneous applause. It was fantastic.
And that wasn't the only time that happened, was it?
Yeah, no.
Well, continuing on, this is at Port Everglades. This was as Carl and Jim both alluded to, this was a submarine that. Let me go back. Carter was a submariner, and he worked for Admiral Hyman Rickover, the father of the nuclear navy. So if you look at the sailor that is on the far left, down low on the far left, right in front of him, you see an older gentleman. Well, that is Admiral Hyman Rickover right there. Mm-hmm. The story is, and tell me if I'm going too long here, Carl. The story is that when Carter came to interview with Rickover to be a part of his nuclear navy that he was creating, Rickover was not an easy interviewer. And what he would do is cut off the front two legs of the chair about 2 inches that Carter was going to be sitting in. Any interviewee would be sitting in and facing Rickover. So this was basically to put the interviewee off balance while he was being interviewed. And so he was kind of a taskmaster. Yeah. And so for Carter to go back and go on a sail with his old boss, Carter being that old boss's new boss, was quite an event. And I was the pool photographer that day and got to go on a day sail with Carter and Rickover on the USS Los Angeles. It was quite a day. And that is Rickover in the foreground. Civil rights, huge in civil rights. This is Jimmy and Rosalind and Coretta Scott King, Martin Luther King's widow, at an event at the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. Rosalind, she was on vacation here. I think we were in the Golden Isles of Georgia, and they were going out on a deep sea fishing day. Amy, Jimmy, and Rosalind. And Rosalind is carrying briefing papers. I don't think she was seen above deck all day. Jimmy arriving, and that is now the new chair of the Carter Center in his arms. That is Jason Carter.
Wow.
And there's Jason again, taking an afternoon ride with his grandpa aboard Marine One. Pretty cool ride. We were in a motorcade one day, and Carter saw that there were kids playing on a baseball field, and so he wanted to stop and enjoy the game. And the kids will always remember him, I'm sure. Secret Service agents trying to keep that boy out of harm's way on the left there, and that is Jody Powell on the far right, who was Carter's press secretary. Carter loved the kids, and the press loved that. This is the opening of the Carter Center. Ronald and Nancy Reagan came to dedicate the Carter Center, along with the Carters, and then that is Joe Frank Harris, who was the Georgia governor at the time, in the background. But Reagan and Carter got along. They became great friends. This is Habitat, and I was at a Habitat event one day photographing the president, and he saw me taking this picture of him. He's pulling a nail out of a misplaced header there on a wall, and he kind of, in other frames you can see, he's kind of giving me the stink eye look, and I didn't know what that was all about. But we sat down to lunch later, having my little brown bag lunch, and President Carter walks up to me, and he just looked down at me and he said, "You know, Ken, that wasn't my mistake." He was a proud carpenter, and he was correcting someone else's mistake.
Oh, that's funny.
And he loved working on those houses. And this was the photograph I made of him, like in 1991, I think. 1991. Clinton was with him on this build, and the only way that Carter told Clinton that he would endorse him, I don't know if this is the fact or not, but he did say this, was if he would come and work on a Habitat build for a day, he would endorse Clinton for president.
Wow.
And the reason being that Habitat needed the publicity. It was kind of a lull in PR for them, and he wanted to get back into national attention. And so I made that, and I held this back really until he passed on, because I thought it was very representative of Carter, the wedding ring and the worn carpenter's belt. Got just a couple of more here. This one is out of place, but this was Edmund Muskie coming for his interview. And again, another arrival. And this is a little sequence of Rosalind.
My favorite photos of Rosalind.
Yeah.
Strip that you have here.
So we were at an event one day, and she was trying to put on a scarf. The wind was blowing hard, and it wasn't cooperating, and it finally just blew away from her, and she just had that beautiful Southern grace, and she just laughed at herself. And President Carter liked this so much, he had me make a 16 by 20, and I think it was up in their office for a number of years, but that was his favorite picture of her. So that's it from me. I'm sorry, I've rattled on with all these.
No,
photos.
these were beautiful photos to see.
No, it's interesting. These, like I said, these three photos of Rosalind are among my favorite. I always, when we would go have our lunches and things, we would be invited at a certain time to show up for lunch or what have you. And everyone was always trying to, maneuver so they get the seat closest to President Carter. Well, I'd done that for a few years, and then I decided, I'm going to hang back, let other people have the opportunity to sit next to the president. And I always ended up sitting with Rosalind, and that was fortuitous for me. I enjoyed it, and she became very comfortable. And I remember one time we were talking or whatever, and she was fiddling with the button on her cuff, and she was getting very frustrated because she couldn't get the button looped. The next thing I know, she just thrusts her arm over at me, and she just says, "Jim, will you button this for me?" And it was that's how familiar you were able to get with them, and it was just wonderful.
Well, before we go into our last two questions, Jim, I especially want to hear from you, because you talk about going to Plains, and over the years you've been to Plains many times.
Yeah.
What was a general weekend in Plains like? If you could describe what a typical weekend spending a weekend with the Carters was like for you.
Well, there was a destination at either end of the visit. So Plains tended to be a stopover. I'm going out of order here. Sunday was always set aside for Sunday school and church. But I would, typically I'd go like on a Saturday. It's, what is it, Ken, about 3.5 hours from Atlanta to get to Plains, something like that. So you drive down there, and they always had a place for me to stay, usually at Jill Stuckey's or someone else's. And and then lunch, usually dinner on a Saturday, or lunch after church was on the agenda, which was nice. But depending on what was planned, you just spend the afternoon in Plains. There's a great character, Philip Curlin, who runs the trading post. I literally spent a whole day just talking to Phil, and he's got so many stories, and he's got every button you can think of, Carl. And you have a couple of those shops you'd see. You'd always want to stop in and get your peanut ice cream at the one of the vendors there. And then, after we had done Plains a couple of times, then we would just, my friends and I would take and spend the afternoon and just go out to the Carter family cemetery. He recently had converted a whole section of his farmland to solar power. So we'd go see the solar farm. There's always something to do.
Yeah.
And you always kept yourself available if the opportunity would show up to go visit them, go to the house. And I was fortunate to be able to do that probably 4 or 5 times. And you would just go, and I remember the first visit vividly. We had asked to come visit his workshop, which was his converted garage. And what was supposed to be a 20-minute visit ended up being an hour and a half. And with Rosalind serving us coffee and whatever box of cookies or candies she had open, and then sitting in their living room and just chatting, just talking about whatever. I was always very careful, hesitant to talk about overtly political things. I didn't want it to seem like a gotcha moment. Mm-hmm. And so I'd always ask him what about your next book? What do you have planned for that? And I remember one time it was after the book Hornet's Nest came out, and it's a story of Georgia during the Revolution, and I just read it. We were talking about it, and he asked me what I thought. I said, "Well, I thought it was good. You had my favorite Revolutionary War general in there, but you didn't spend a lot of time talking about him." And he was like, "Well, who's that?" And oh no, I'm missing his name. Dan Morgan. But who's the general? Anyways, it'll come to me. So he said, "Well, you know about this particular general. He started the war with a bang, and then he kind of faded, and he came back later. And you know what the problem was? No, what? He had hemorrhoids." And then Carter went on a big talk about when he had hemorrhoids in the White House, and Anwar Sadat found out about it and got the whole country of Egypt to pray for Carter it would be healed from his hemorrhoids. It was just a great story. That's kind of, it's funny, Carl. I for one, never lost sense of who I was with or who I was talking to. But he was very familiar, even with that. And you would have very natural stream of consciousness discussions with the guy. And that was what was wonderful about my association with him. So anyway,
we'll move in here to this sort of feeds into one of our last questions for both of you. What was the last time you were with President Carter, and did you know it would be the last time?
Ken, do you want to take that?
Sure. The last time that I was with him was actually when Jim was there. We talked about being out in the Columbia Gorge at an event, a Carter Center event, and I live in Oregon now, and so I wouldn't see them that often. I've retired, but it was 2018, I think, wasn't it, Jim? When
Yeah.
we were up there?
Yeah.
And we were able to spend some time. I was able to exhibit, I guess I had about 35 photographs from the campaign and from the White House exhibited there at the event. And so he and I went out, much to the chagrin of the staff. We went out and did a walkthrough and reminisced about a lot of the photographs and the times that we had shared, and it was a special moment for me. And I of course didn't know that it would be the last time, but I imagined that it would be.
That event at Skamania amongst the Carter Weekend Group is considered probably one of the best weekends. So he was in great form. She was in great form. We had wonderful weather, and Jimmy Webb was there when he performed on his piano out in the middle of the gorge.
Oh, wow.
Peter Yarrow was there. That was a great event. My last time in recent years, I kind of approached every visit with him as this would be my last time. His health was declining, and they were really controlling access to him. But some friends and I had put together some money to help build a uh, commission a sculpture of a monarch butterfly tree in honor of Rosalind, and we were there for the dedication of that, and that was 2022, her birthday, August, and it was evident that his health was declining, and they weren't even supposed to be at the dedication of the sculpture, but I kind of hoped that they would be. Well, as it turned out, they were there. Chip kind of pulled me aside and said, "Okay, they're going to be here at this time, this time." I said, "I'd love to have just a couple of minutes with them." And he said, "We'll see what we can do." And at the appointed time, they come rolling up, and he comes out, and he's you can tell he's gotten older, and but he's still got that great smile of his. And Chip kind of motioned to me, and I came over, and I sat down with the president for, like I said, just not even probably 5 minutes. And I basically wanted to use the occasion to thank him for all these years of access and opportunity, and to tell him I loved him. And that was what I wanted to accomplish with that visit, and I was able to do it. And I'm glad I had the chance to do that. So, but that was it. And you just kind of knew. And the other thing was, it was like wrapping up a package. No need to go back for more. Mm-hmm. Sure, if the opportunities came up and they said, "We want you down here," I would have gone, but I didn't need to, and that was enough. Yeah. Prior to that, we Ken, were you there for the anniversary party?
No, I wasn't.
Okay. Yeah, a year or two before that was their 75th anniversary, and my wife and I were honored to be invited to that, and that was a special event. But no, the Monarch sculpture event was it.
Well, as we close our time up, and we're thinking forward, and think of, mentally, it's the year 2124. It's 100 years from now. Most of the people, if not, all of them who have ever directly interacted with President Carter have passed on. I mean, there may be some great grandkids who lived to be 100 with his genes. Yeah. Maybe they were beneficiaries of that. But if you were going to leave a little statement or a video for someone to hear in 100 years, what's the takeaway you want future generations to have about President Carter and the Carters?
Jim, why don't you go?
Oh, I was just going to say, you can be so profound. Why don't well, a couple of things come immediately in mind, and my first comment is not exactly what you're asking, Carl. Mm-hmm. In recent years, a lot of people have, said, "Oh, this is no way to live." Hopefully he'll pass quickly or whatever. I viewed the last couple of years for the president as, well, it may have been physically challenging. What I took away from the last several years was he had a chance to hear the reassessments about him and his presidency from people that had been critics over the years. And I think the reviews have been wonderful. and I think they've been well deserved. Um, so I would hope that 100 years from now, people are looking at these contemporary reassessments and having a fuller view of the Carter presidency. Stu Eisenstadt has written a spectacular book about uh, the Carter years and the success of the Carter presidency. Um, it was always so easy to just button it up as, well, he was a failed one-term president. But there was so much more to the man, to the years he was in office. And I also think, as we've touched on, his presidency is an era gone by, and not one we are likely to see again. Certainly not in my lifetime. And I think back to '76. It was my first presidential election, and he was a breath of fresh air. And I think he continued to not only be a breath of fresh air, but he did his best to embody the kind of individual I think the founders wanted for a president, and a moral leader as well as a political leader. So like I said, I love the guy, and as I opened with, as a Republican from the San Fernando Valley, it's kind of funny to find myself saying that, but I really did. So I can't be unbiased when talking about Jimmy Carter.
Ken?
Yeah, Carl, I was just in an event we were talking about earlier up at the Gates Foundation. There was a memorial, a condolence book signing, and I was honored to show some of the photographs that you saw today in print form, and I was watching as people watching and listening as people would go through the line waiting to sign the condolence book and looking at the photographs. And we had little descriptions of what was going on in the photographs, little captions. And it stirred such conversation and such memories and it just got a thought process going with many of the people, at least half of the people that were viewing it. And, I think that we need the Carter Center and what they're doing to remind folks of that legacy that Jimmy Carter and Rosalind Carter have left us. He was, like we've talked about, he was a builder, and that builder laid a foundation for the Carter Center and a lot of ancillary groups to go forward doing good for the world. I was fortunate to sit next to the woman with the Gates Foundation that runs the NTD department, which is the neglected tropical disease efforts that the Gates Foundation has, and they've been longtime partners with the Carter Center in the elimination of both guinea worm, which they've been tremendously successful with, and I believe also river blindness and several other diseases. And I think that we just need constant reminders of that foundation that the Carters, I should say, have laid for us in going forward. And I think that 100 years from now, if we pay attention to that message that he has given us, that the world will be a better place.
Yeah. I agree.
Well,
Ken references earlier, and it's a fun story to delve into at some other point. But the Carter campaign got to start with this group called the
Peanut Brigade.
Peanut Brigade. I was going to say Peanut Express. Peanut Brigade. In many ways, those of us that have been active with the Carter Center or aware of the Carter Center, we're the next Peanut Brigade, where we're going out and we're talking about neglected tropical diseases, guinea worm, things like that. So he's really fostered a group of new Peanut Brigade participants, but to talk about the work of the Carter Center.
In the Carter Center, you've got to realize it's not like some presidential libraries where it's kind of self-aggrandizing for the president. This is not all about Jimmy Carter. And if you know Jimmy Carter, you'll realize that when you start talking to him about himself, he'll come to the point pretty quickly where where he goes, "Well, enough about me. Let's talk about guinea worm."
Yeah.
And that's the kind of man he was, and I think still exists in many of our minds. And I think that that's the legacy that he's left us, is doing good for the world going forward.
Wonderful. I think that's you know, what we should be striving to do every day is to how much good can we do? And I think that's a wonderful legacy and a wonderful note for us to end our conversation on. Thank you for joining me on Down the Ballot. It's been a while, been sort of distracted in life, had to get back to it, but I'm happy that this was the first interview of the year I got to do. And I'm hoping soon, when Jim's fully recovered, we get to abduct him down downtown Tigard and have lunch.
Sounds good.